Brian Fritz here for BetweenTheRopes.com. On Thursday, a fascinating story was put out on Grantland.com. The story titled "The Wrestler in Real Life: Ric Flair's Long Steady Decline." An amazing account of Ric Flair's issues that he's had with money, the amount of debt that he's accrued, the lifestyle that he's lived, and where he's at right now. And the author of that story, Shane Ryan, joins me right now. Shane, thanks for the time. How's everything going?
Everything's good. Thanks for having me.
First of all, where did you get the idea to write this story?
Yeah, so I was interning earlier this summer at the Charlotte Observer. I had just finished my first year at the journalism school here at UNC Chapel Hill. And so the first thing that came up was this order for contempt and arrest came to the newsroom from High Spots. And the deal was that Ric Flair owed $35,000 to High Spots, and for whatever reason couldn't pay it. So, the immediate question was, why can't this guy who is, very rich and very famous, or at least should be, why can't he repay such a relatively small loan? And I didn't know much about Ric Flair's finances or anything. I knew about his wrestling, but so we kind of really I got into the paper trail at the Charlotte courthouse, and it was really something. It was extensive, and it showed exactly. After a while, it showed exactly how he had come to that place where even a small loan like that would get in trouble.
How long did it take you to write this piece and research it?
With the research and the writing, it probably took about 2 months before I turned in the final copy to my editor.
Now, are you a wrestling fan, or were you a wrestling fan at some point?
A mild wrestling fan. I mean, this was more circumstantial. That it was kind of an accident that the Flair story came in. I used to really like wrestling as a kid, but I guess I'd grown away from it over the last couple of years.
Now, what was your reaction as you were doing the research for this and as everything was being uncovered?
Well, it was really interesting stuff, and I think for some people doing that kind of research would be boring, and I'm sure it can be, but in this case, the details were so interesting. It was almost like putting a puzzle together. Like, here's how it started. Here are, in 1990, here's the early traces of, some little blips on the radar. Bad decision not to pay taxes for $10,000 or something. And then you gradually watch it accumulate over the next 20 years until, it's a huge problem for him, and it's severely affecting his life. So the reaction was always just with each new thing, it was, unbelievable. One of the last ones I did was the whole historic thing where his accountant really kind of milked him out of a lot of money, and that was the last thing I did, and it was kind of like the perfect thing to do at the end because it was the most kind of crazy in a way, and I think the saddest too.
Well, that's the thing, too, because we can sit here and everybody's accountable for their own problems. And Ric Flair definitely is accountable for a lot of the things that have gone on in his life, especially when it comes to the debt that he's accrued. But at the same time, there is some aspect of it where I think he's guilty of maybe trusting the wrong people way too many times when you talk about the financial advisor in Storic, the guy Chris Porter for the Ric Flair Finance Company, other people as he did the gym business with. And it's pretty astonishing all the times that he tries to invest money or tries to do other things and see the way that, he gets taken advantage of basically too.
Yeah, and you wonder, is it just that he had really bad luck, or do you kind of make your own bad luck? I think when you're someone as high profile as Flair, there will be, no matter who you are or what you're doing, when you have that much money, there's going to be people out there who maybe float a line to try to take advantage of you, and someone who's a little more cautious would never, get involved with these people beyond an initial discussion or something. But he did, and it really hurt him. But yeah, you really do wonder, where does the line between bad luck and poor decision-making converge?
And what is it about athletes with bad investments? I mean, you hear about all these athletes all the time that make millions of dollars, even hundreds of $1 million in some cases, like an Antoine Walker. And I know that sometimes they share too much money with family or just, give their money out to friends or, party or whatever too much. But so many times you hear about them making these investments that are just so bad and they end up losing, a good portion of their fortune.
Yeah, I mean, the classic example, too, is Lenny Dykstra, the baseball player. There's a story that came out about him a couple of years ago where it was just kind of a similar thing, where he had just made a lot of really bad decisions. I don't have a good answer for that. The only thing I would say is that they probably typically when they're in the peak of their athletic career have other people managing their money for them to a big extent, people who know what to do. And they certainly, I would say most of them never had formal financial education. And so maybe when they're, I don't know, maybe when they're making their own decisions, they don't really know what they're doing, or they think they know more than they do, or who knows. But it is strange how the pattern of emerges of these guys losing a lot of money.
Now, we all, I think most people know about Ric Flair. You've heard of him. You've heard about the Nature Boy. You've heard about the personality. And that's some of that where, you know, a lot of times, especially with Rick, he became that personality. He took on that guy. He became this flamboyant, bigger than life kind of guy that was spending money. He was, you know, at some point in his career was asked to live that kind of life, but he enjoyed it and he's always continued to do that. How much do you think the wrestling business is to blame for this as being an enabler?
Yeah, see, that is tough for me to comment on in some ways, just because I'm not intensely familiar with the wrestling life. I have friends who are, and they told me about it, and this seems to be, again, a pattern among wrestlers, and you can also look at it as a pattern among athletes more broadly. But, yeah, I mean, Ric Flair is a guy who's certainly committed to this persona at a young age. He was someone who I don't think ever wanted to worry about money, so he kind of left it to other people, and he spent a lot, and I mean, a lot of the stories I heard was that, Ric Flair would always be the guy to buy dinner or to buy everybody a plane trip somewhere or something, like super generous. And just didn't want to, even today, I think, doesn't want to think about the downside to it. But that stuff grows, that the downside grows when you're not looking. And it reached up and got him. But, in terms of the wrestling industry, that's a good question that I probably have not enough expertise to answer.
We talk about surrounding yourself with the wrong people. I think the biggest people he surrounded him with that were wrong were his wives. In doing the story, yeah. How crazy are the women that he surrounded himself with?
Yeah, there's a lot of stories that really make you wonder. But you're hearing these divorce affidavits are interesting because you're hearing the extreme side of both parties. So anything that's come up, they want to release it. But I think one thing we can say for sure is that Elizabeth, his second wife, is not a good person to let manage his money. I think, number one. And then some of the stories with Tiffany, how she stole some of his stuff when he left and everything, that stuff seems, on the surface, you can be like, wow, that's, poor Rick. I mean, she's doing this to him, and he has no chance because, she's taking all his stuff and treating him like this and hitting him with a cell phone charger or whatever. But then, at the same time, you don't really hear the other side too much because it benefits them more to come public with it. Where I think Ric Flair's a guy who just kind of wants to get things over with. So maybe there was a good reason for it or maybe not. But, yeah, certainly it didn't work out. We can say that.
Yeah. I'm not trying to take sides on it, but I will say this in reading it. It's cold when you steal somebody's dead mother's jewelry and the guy's dog.
Yeah, I certainly can't argue with you there. That was the one. The jewelry thing was insane, and then the other thing that really was crazy was how Tiffany and her mother controlled his insurance policy, which for a guy like Ric Flair with a lot of bumps and bruises over time and getting older is a really big deal to have good insurance. And then when they divorced, she just kind of took it away from him because it was not in his name, so she could do that. And he eventually got some of that back, but yeah, that was cold. Taking the dog was cold, and the mother's wedding ring. Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of cold stuff there.
But, it all goes down to Rick. He's the guy that's put himself in this position. I mean, you don't want to, give him a free pass on anything because he has lived this lifestyle, which has been bigger than life. And you talk about some of the amount of money, how generous he could be with some friends, but also the lifestyle that he lives. You accounted some of this when it comes to the amount that he spends on clothing, how much he spends on food, travel, things like that. He's done throughout his life, especially through his past couple of marriages. Was there anything in particular that stood out and surprised you? And how has he been able to continue this kind of lifestyle considering the amount of debt that he's accrued?
Well, I'll tell you, it's a really good question. I mean, the one thing that stood out to me is all the jewelry he bought. There was so much so much money. Now he owes Fink's Jewelers something like $76,000. But as to how he kept it going, it's a really hard question to answer. It certainly has a lot of income, so there's always that money coming in. And I think until recently, he didn't have too many liens or levies on his money coming in. in the sense that whatever money he made, it had to go to someone, which is true now. But yeah, he's taking out huge loans. He's got credit card debt and everything like that. And Michael Baciccio, I think I'm pronouncing that right, at High Spot. When we talked, he had a theory that maybe some of these debts Ric Flair can repay and chooses not to, or chooses to be difficult. I don't think that's universally true, but I think there's a part of it that just doesn't deal with these things as they come up.
How much money does he owe right now in debt?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I think it's impossible because you can only get the ones that have been brought to court. That's all you can know about. Okay, so if he has debts to other people, even if he signs something, we can't know that on public record until that person decides to sue him. And also, a good example is the Greg Leon thing. I kind of got lucky to get that story because that lawsuit was filed in South Carolina. So there's no way I would have known about that if I had just researched in Charlotte, North Carolina, where Rick lived and where the majority of this stuff is. Another example, the Flight from Hell Arizona lawsuit that was filed in Arizona. And you just happen to know these things because you follow the connections and everything else. With Greg Leon, I read about it in one of the divorce settlements that they owed him money. So it's really hard to say. It's really hard to come up with a total.
How many friends has he lost throughout this? Because, in doing research, you got an opportunity to speak with a lot of people and trying to figure out the stories, and you've heard so many different things. What is, and talking to some of the people that are kind of close to him or have been close with him, they obviously don't have a relationship with anymore or don't have a good one, and it seems like he's lost a good deal of friends throughout the years because of money problems.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty steady formula. If you're a friend of Flair's and you loan money to him, I think, unless you don't care about getting that money back, I think it's a short road to losing the friendship for sure.
Did anybody talk about the allure of Flair? Because, we see the Nature Boy. We see the guy that's on TV, and there's a certain charm to him. Obviously a lot of that charm must play over into his real life.
Oh, I'm sure, and I did hear that from Leon to a certain extent, and definitely from Michael Baciccio, just how, electric the guy is. He's fun to be around. Like I said, he's always paying for anything. He's bringing people to his shows. He's certainly, what made him so great as a performer? This is like one of the few guys in history who could be a bad guy and still have everybody rooting for him, in the arena. Someone who can do that has just loads of personal charisma. And that definitely transferred over to his private life, for sure.
Now, I know that you reached out to try to speak with Rick to comment for the story, and he declined. Did you speak with him personally or just management around him?
No, I did. First I spoke with management, and they, God, I hope I'm not mispronouncing it, but I think it's Zanoni is the talent agency that manages him.
Uh-huh.
And I talked to them, and it was very strange. I told them where I was from, Grantland.com, which is, an ESPN site. This story is on the front page of ESPN.com now.
Right.
And I went through the whole thing and emailed a bunch of people, and then someone named Ashley called me back and said, right now we're only doing interviews with mainstream sites. That was how she worded it. And I said, I was like, well, ESPN's, that's a pretty mainstream site.
Yeah.
But she wouldn't, I'm sorry, we're not doing it. So that was fine. And then I got Ric Flair's cell phone number, and I spoke with him. A really brief conversation. I said, listen, I talked to your people about this story. He said, what's the story about? And I said, it's about your whole career, but it's about inside and outside the ring and everything. And we'd like to talk to you. I know your people said no, but I think the story would be better. It'd be better for you if you could comment on the record. And he just said, if my people say no, the answer's no. So
now,
I was on the phone with him for maybe a minute.
Yeah.
Very, very short.
As extensive as the story is there anything in particular that didn't make the story that stood out, or something that you would like to have made the story?
That's a good question. There's a few quotes that were pretty incendiary that made the story. I'm trying to think what other details. Most of the details made the story. A lot of what was taken out of the story was like analysis and things like that, or if you read the story now, it's very much reads like a newspaper article where it kind of is a list of all the things that happened after you get past the first part. So a lot of what was cut was sort of like there was a conclusion cut and things like that. One thing that might be interesting to people is I went to see him hoping to, just at least see him perform so I could write the story. So I went to Brooklyn where he was supposed to perform with TNA.
Yeah, and that was the no-show.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was the no-show. And the TNA people kept saying he was going to show and everything like that, and he never did. And that was something that was in the story. So that was too bad. And then, yeah, the rest of the stuff that wasn't in there was just kind of like, you know, just talking about it a little bit. But I think the bulk of the details really stayed in there. But yeah, there was some other stuff. So.
And, you know, in reading the story, I mean, we can all have, you know, our eyes pop out of our head and we see the amount of money being thrown around here when it comes to the debt. But the other thing that really stood out to me was that you put in there that this is a guy that, while not in the ring as much as he once was, it's kind of rare now, but he still does get in the ring. He hasn't been with TNA. I mean, he's still employed there, but he hasn't been around or working with them for a few months, and he's getting ready to go back into the ring here very soon, is that he's suffering from alcoholic cardiomyopathy. And so obviously, I mean, anytime you hear about any kind of heart disease, that's got to be a pretty serious issue. And this is a guy that's still getting in the ring with it. I mean, how were you shocked to hear that he was suffering from that and still gets into the ring?
Yeah, I was shocked. And my original, you know, my immediate guess was that, you know, he's forced to get in the ring. Like, he has to do it for the money. So, you know, this is a really sad story about a guy who's, you know, risking everything even though he doesn't want to, but because he owes money for his past mistakes. But from the people I talked to, that's not the case at all. Like, he just really, you know, losing wrestling is not something he ever wants to do. If it was up to him, he'd be wrestling all the time. That's what I'm hearing from people, and that's why he stays, because he loves the business so much.
Did you ever try to look in?
Yeah, it's certainly.
I'm sorry, you can finish.
It's certainly shocking. It's definitely shocking that you wrestle him into the heart disease. But
how serious is that condition?
That I don't know. I can tell you that all I know is that he has it. We know that from the divorce records of Elizabeth, and I have no idea. I don't have medical reports or anything like that. So it's. I mean, you can read up on the disease. It's not a good thing to have, but it's
right.
You know, it's not necessarily also debilitating. It doesn't mean he's going to have a heart attack the minute he exerts himself or anything like that.
And it's pretty obvious. I mean, this is a guy that, you know, legendary stories about him drinking alcohol for all-night benders and then, you know, waking up on 3 hours of sleep, going out, working out, running on the beach, and getting back in the ring for an hour.
Yeah, I mean, he as much energy as you see in his performances and everything. I think he had that in his real life. And you know, you read things like that, all these stories of, you know, even these other party animal wrestlers are dying, and you know they're. You know, like, they can't go anymore. They party too much, and Flair's the one showing up, being like, "Hey guys, you know, what are we? let's keep going."
Yeah.
So he just incredible energy on the man, unending energy.
I don't know if you even tried to delve into this portion of his life, but obviously wrestling is such a big part of it. But I mean, there's other ways for him to make money. I know that he's had deals or still has deals as an endorsement guy for Coke and for the North Carolina lottery.
The lottery, yeah.
Yeah. Did you know, hey, and I don't know if you even looked into this, but, do you know if he's hurt those relationships or other relationships for endorsement people because of, you know, the debt that he has or anything that's going on in his life?
I don't know. I don't know for sure. I think not, but don't quote me on that for sure. I looked into the endorsement deals a little bit. The only thing I saw was that some people were upset about how much he was getting paid by the lottery, but, I don't think, as far as I know, I should say, I don't know of any damage he's done to those current endorsement deals. Yeah, I mean, it can't be good, you'd think, right? But I mean, so far he still has them. So one thing that was interesting, you talked about the promo performances. The Cheat Show, when I spoke to him, he was the owner of High Spots. Mm-hmm. And this was in the court order too. He was willing to let that debt go if Flair would just show up and sign some, you know, I think it was like 7 events or something, or just sign some memorabilia.
Right.
The whole thing would have been resolved. And so that's another example of what I was talking about earlier of, you know, there's ways around this debt, and whether it's making money for these performances or something like that, but he kind of, he sometimes shows a strange unwillingness to deal with things. So, you know, meanwhile, here's this order for contempt and arrest coming out when all he would have had to done is show up for a few events. So I don't know if that's pride coming into play or what it is, but there are odd little things like that.
And speaking with other people, especially those people that are still around him or have been, do they find it a sad story, or are they still ticked off? Because you're talking about a guy that's many people is held in legendary status, and then you hear this story, you hear some of the things that have happened to him in his personal life, and for many people it can be very sad.
Yeah, it's like so many people refuse to speak to me, but I can speak about, Greg Leon seemed like he was still pretty upset. He's the one who, he lives in South Carolina and Rick owed him money. But Show, I think there's a certain amount of anger there too. But I think he takes the long view too. I think he sees this as a sad story. I mean, the quote that ended the story was, he can never separate Ric Flair from Richard Flair. So that's, I think that in a way says it all. He can see, he's got a little perspective, I think, on the nature of his personality that leads to things like this.
If you'd gotten more of an opportunity to speak with Rick and say he said, I'll answer one question, what would you ask him?
Wow, one question for Flair. That would be
I don't know if
tough.
that's possible, even me speaking with him, but let me throw that one out there.
Yeah, no, let me think about that. So one question to ask him, I guess, boy, if I just had one question, I feel like I would try to make it as broad as possible and say something like, no.
Because he won't, I guarantee he'd say he has no regrets in life.
Because that's what I was thinking just now. Like, yeah, but I think you're right. I think he would say no regrets at all. Maybe I'd ask him, put it this way: who's to blame for the debt and some of the troubles that are in your life now? And
Yeah.
I'm curious to see if he blames himself or if he blamed other people, because you can certainly make an argument for both.
I'm sure you can't give me exacts, and I'm not even sure if you can give me even generic, but do you know how much traffic the story's done already?
I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea, and I'm not even withholding anything from you because I don't have access to that. I can tell you the response on Twitter and on Facebook has been pretty incredible, and around the internet.
Yeah.
So I would imagine the traffic is pretty high, but I don't have any solid numbers on that.
Most of the response you've gotten is, I'm sure there's their fair share of wrestling fans, but a lot of people that don't follow wrestling on a regular basis, they commented on it?
Yeah, so, and as you know, the Grantland doesn't have comments, but you can do it on Facebook. So I think there's been a few comments on Facebook, and I do not get emails that go to Grantland.
Right.
For whatever reason, that's their thing. I don't have access to the email account there, so I can't speak to that. On Twitter, I've gotten hundreds of responses. People, for the most part, pretty positive. The negative ones that I've seen, people keep asking me if I'm getting angry emails and stuff from wrestling fans, and maybe Grantland is, but I haven't so far. What I get is, what was the point of this story? Like, why would you do this story? Like, there's a lot of people like this. Why would you choose him? And the other thing I got, and I guess this is more of a writing criticism, was just that they wanted to, some people on Facebook were commenting that they wanted to, I guess, see more, I guess they felt it was kind of like a list of his misdeeds or something, and they wanted to see more sort of a narrative around it. I mean, I personally feel like the narrative speaks for itself, but
Yeah.
I mean, those are the things I've heard on the negative side. But I'd say it's been pretty overwhelmingly positive, though.
I think you only have so much space, too, for a story. I know that you got expanded space, and they have that on Grantland, but there has to come to an end at some point.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first draft I sent to the editors was, it must have been like 7,600 words, and I think this version up there is 5,100.
Yeah.
So as you can see, that's what third of the story about cut. So it's and like you said, I think that's you can't indulge writers like me too much.
Yeah.
I'll always use more space if I can have it, but I think that's why editors exist in the world.
I think Outside the Line should do an investigation here.
Yeah, that would certainly be interesting. I mean, it would be great if they could get. I mean, even I would like to do this, to just talk to Flair and make the story more about, or at least have his perspective involved in it.
Right. Well, I do think it would help him out if he did speak, because as much as people can be angry with him, he'd have that opportunity to be in front of the camera and turn on that Ric Flair charm, whether you buy it or not, and if he's being sincere or not, that he would give his side of the story and let it be at that, and people could, judge for themselves at that point.
I think you're right, and I think one thing that was interesting about writing this is just that, I felt like I got Ric Flair a little bit, like his character, and I didn't have any negative feelings for him at all. It was just a story for me of what had happened, and certainly he has his own personal qualities that led to all the consequences that came. But I think if you know Ric Flair, and I hope in some way I conveyed it in the story, that to also see his personality and what he's like, because I think that is important. Like you said, there's a lot of charisma there, so whether or not he's being sincere all the time is up for debate. But that's one thing that I wish had been more present in the story, for sure.
If Outside the Lines won't do it, at least pitch Bill Simmons to do a 30 for 30. He likes wrestling, too.
Yeah, boy, that would be, if you could get a great filmmaker on it, that would be fascinating, wouldn't it?
That would be fascinating. If you could actually get people to open the doors and get the right person on that would be an incredible story. So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, fascinating story. Great work that you did. I encourage everybody to read the story. It's over on Grantland.com, titled The Wrestler in Real Life, Ric Flair's Long, Steady Decline. And then people can follow you on Twitter. It's at Tobacco RD Blues. In other words, Tobacco Road Blues. And people can follow you on Twitter.
TOA.
Yep. And then everybody can also follow you over at TobaccoRoadBlues.com as well, which is your other normal blogging job, correct?
Well, that's actually my own site. It's not a job per se. I don't get paid for it. That's a site dedicated to Duke and UNC sports.
It's job, love of life. It's all the same.
Exactly.
Well, fantastic job again, Shane, and appreciate the time today and talking to me about the Ric Flair story.
No problem. Thank you very much.